Hello, welcome to my video overview where I will walk through my mind map explaining what is evidence-based practice in healthcare and the concepts that go into it. So in summary, to begin with, evidence-based practice in healthcare means we as practitioners or healthcare support staff apply or translate research findings into daily patient care and clinical decision making. In order for evidence-based practice to be successful in the clinical setting, there are certain components that need to be considered. The first one being models and elements over here. There are two standard, which is the 7-step process, where 7 steps need to be taken, and this is kind of your main thing that everyone needs to consider. So step 0 is to cultivate a spirit of inquiry. Step 1 is formulating your clinical PCOT question, where P stands for patient population, I is intervention or issue, C is comparison or intervention group, O stands for outcome, and C stands for time frame. The next step in that, step 2, is to search for the best evidence to help answer your question. Step 3 is where you will critically review the evidence gathered. You're looking for validity, reliability, and then step 4, you will integrate the evidence found with provider, clinical expertise, and patient and family preferences to make the best decision. Step 5 is to evaluate the outcomes of your practice change based on your evidence. And then the last step is going to be disseminate the outcomes of your evidence-based change. And it's important to share your research. The next one is the Iowa model of EBP. It can be great for healthcare settings as it was founded and developed at UIHC. This model can help increase patient outcomes as the first step is to identify your issues, whether that be clinical, patient, or even organizational. The organization would then form a team, synthesize evidence, design and pilot practice change, identify and sustain the change, and disseminate the results. So very similar to the 7-step model here. There's also in this model some feedback loops that are built in. So if something's not working, that's okay. You just back up and reevaluate, your question or your evidence. And this helps improve quality of health outcomes by finding workflows that work best for your practice. The next component here that makes up is research. When doing evidence-based practice, you want to build off of what is already known and what has already been done or discovered. So the first step is using research databases to find evidence and finding literature reviews and finding good evidence so you can build a base off of your PCOT question that was developed here. And just so you're not repeating what was already done, you want to make sure and do your research. The next component is clinical experience. There are 3 core components that kind of play into your clinical experience, and that is clinical, technical, and organizational. Clinical is going to be anything directly related to patient care, such as diagnosis, assessment, your relationship with your patients, and your knowledge of care models. Technical skills are related to knowledge and skills related to your research, and how well you're able to validate and check the reliability of research. And your organizational skills, that is going to be your teamwork and your leadership and decision-making skills. So all of these make up clinical experience, and clinical experience you want to have in order to effectively put evidence-based practice into research or into healthcare. The next one is going to be ethics. There are 4 core principles of ethics that are pretty well known and are very important to have effective evidence-based practice in healthcare. There's benefits, meaning doing good for patients. One should be sure their research and practice has social and scientific value. Non-maleficence, meaning no harm should come to patients and there should be maximum benefit. Autonomy acknowledges that the patient has the right to make decisions regarding their own health. There should always be informed consent by the patients, as their involvement in any sort of research or experimental trials is going to be needed. And finally, there is justice, meaning the findings and resources should be distributed fairly amongst all people. There should be a fair subject selection so the risks and benefits are shared equally. Ethics should really always guide every decision you make in evidence-based practice. The next thing that flows into evidence-based practice is the patient. Patients are the number one consumer of healthcare, so getting their opinion is important, and the patient should always be the center. When practicing evidence-based practice, you must take into account the patient preferences, the patient's own code of ethics, the patient's values. The patient's insurance plays a big role in what will or will not be covered when doing any sort of trials. And then any sort of special circumstances that the patient may have. Maybe we want them to do something and they don't have transportation to get there. So always considering each patient has a unique background. The next concept is collaboration. Once you conduct your evidence-based practice, it is important to share your findings with others, whether that be published within your organization or shared at big conferences, poster presentations, panels, nationwide conferences. It's important to share so others can learn from what you have done and we're not reinventing the wheel every time. And then it's also important to kind of create some committees and get collaboration and feedback from other providers, your board of directors, any sort of involvement with committees. And the final thing that needs to be in place for evidence-based practice in healthcare is leadership. And this is kind of coming back to the 7 steps here. The first step was creating a culture where evidence-based practice can even occur and begin, and that really stems from having good leadership, creating that culture where people feel safe to want to learn and grow, having EPB mentors in your hierarchy or organization. This can be an advanced practice physician with very in-depth knowledge and skills to help others grow. And then transformational leadership, where leaders and followers, find meaning and purpose in their work, and they grow and they develop. So having good leadership flows into creating this culture right off the bat where all of the rest of these things can really occur. There are, as you can see, a lot here, but there are even more. These are just some really major points that stood out to me and what I will have learned and will be able to take back to my own practice.